The first thing I heard at my mother's funeral wasn't a prayer. It wasn't a eulogy. It wasn't even someone saying they were sorry for my loss. It was my brother-in-law's voice cutting through the silence of the chapel like a knife. "Since everyone will find out soon anyway," he said loudly, standing beside the front row, "I think it's only fair to announce that my wife, Claire, will inherit Mom's entire estate. All $4.2 million. A shocked murmur rippled through the room. I froze. The funeral director stopped moving. Even the priest looked confused. My sister Claire lowered her eyes but didn't correct him. And just like that, less than an hour after our mother had been laid to rest, my family's ugliest secret exploded into the open. I stared at Claire, waiting for her to laugh and tell everyone her husband was being insensitive. Waiting for her to say there had been some mistake. Instead, she simply nodded. My stomach dropped. Our mother, Evelyn Parker, had died unexpectedly at 72 after a brief illness. She had built a successful chain of home furnishing stores from nothing. Everyone knew she was wealthy, but few knew exactly how wealthy. Apparently my brother-in-law did. And he seemed very eager for everyone else to know too. "Congratulations," I said quietly. The words tasted like poison. Claire looked away. Her husband, Derek, smiled. That smile made me sick. Growing up, Claire and I had been inseparable. We shared a bedroom, secrets, clothes, dreams. Then Derek entered the picture. Within a few years, everything changed. He controlled where she went, who she spoke to, what she wore, even how often she called Mom. Mom hated it. She never hid her feelings. "You married a salesman who thinks he's a king," she'd tell Claire. Derek hated Mom right back. Their arguments became legendary. At Christmas, birthdays, family dinners. Every gathering eventually turned into a fight. Yet somehow, according to Derek, Mom had decided to leave Claire everything. Not 50%. Not a larger share. Everything. The entire $4.2 million estate. It made no sense. After the funeral guests left, I found Claire standing alone beside the church parking lot. "Is it true?" I asked. Her eyes were red from crying. "I don't know." "What do you mean you don't know?" "Derek says Mom changed her will." "Derek says?" She looked exhausted. "The attorney called him." I stared at her. "The attorney called Derek instead of you?" Claire hesitated. That was answer enough. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. 3 days later the family gathered at the attorney's office for the official reading. The room felt tense enough to snap. Derek sat confidently beside Claire. I sat across from them. Mom's attorney, Robert Hensley, entered carrying a thick folder. He looked uncomfortable. That alone caught my attention. My mother had worked with Robert for 20 years. He was never uncomfortable. He cleared his throat. "Before we begin, there are some unusual instructions left by Evelyn." Derek smiled. I hated that smile. Robert opened the file. "The estate is valued at approximately $4.2 million, including properties, investments, and business holdings." Derek's smile widened. Claire remained silent. Robert continued. "The most recent will leaves the entire estate to Claire Parker Sullivan." Derek practically leaned forward in triumph. I felt as though someone had punched me in the chest. Not because of the money. Because Mom would never have done that. Never. She believed fairness mattered more than anything. Robert held up a hand. "However." The room went silent. "There is an attached statement." Derek's smile faded slightly. Robert unfolded a letter. This statement was to be read aloud if any dispute regarding the will occurred. Then he began reading. "If you are hearing this, It means someone is already fighting over my money. That does not surprise me. Several people shifted uncomfortably. Mom's voice practically echoed through the words. I intentionally created confusion because I needed to know who was interested in my family and who was interested in my wealth. Derek frowned. Robert continued. The document naming Claire sole heir is not the final instruction. It is only the first step. Now everyone was staring. Even Derek. The true distribution of my estate depends on a condition that must be fulfilled within 30 days of my death. The room exploded with questions. Robert raised his hand. Please let me finish. He looked down again. My daughters will each receive sealed envelopes. Inside is a task. The daughter who completes her task honestly will inherit my estate. Derek jumped up. What kind of nonsense is this? Robert calmly handed each of us an envelope. Claire and I looked at one another. Neither of us had expected this. My hands trembled as I opened mine. Inside was a single sheet. I read it twice. Then 3 times. I couldn't believe it. My task was simple. Mom wanted me to spend 30 days managing one of her oldest furniture stores, the very first store she had ever opened. No assistance. No special treatment. No revealing my connection to ownership. Just work. 30 days. Claire opened hers. Her face went pale. Derek immediately tried grabbing the paper. She pulled it away. What does it say? He demanded. Claire swallowed hard. Mom wants me to spend 30 days at her charity housing foundation. And? I have to live in one of the housing units. What? No money. No luxury. No using family accounts. Derek looked horrified. Mom had always supported a housing charity for struggling families. Apparently she wanted Claire to experience it firsthand. The next month changed everything. I spent every day in the old store. At first employees treated me like a stranger. Because I was one. I learned inventory. Customer service. Repairs. Deliveries. Long hours. I met workers who had been with Mom for decades. One by one they told me stories. Stories I had never heard. Stories about how Mom secretly paid medical bills. Covered college tuition. Saved businesses. Helped families survive disasters. The more I learned, the more I missed her. Meanwhile, Claire moved into the charity housing complex. For the first time in years, Derek couldn't control everything. Visitors were restricted. Financial records were monitored. Residents had responsibilities. And slowly something changed. Claire started calling me. Really calling me. Like she had before she met Derek. One evening she broke down crying. I don't think Mom trusted him. I knew exactly who she meant. I know. I think she was trying to show me something. I remained silent. Because deep down I suspected the same thing. 2 weeks later the truth surfaced. One of Mom's former accountants contacted me. She sounded nervous. There are documents you should see. When we met, she handed me copies of financial transfers. Large transfers. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. All routed through accounts connected to Derek. My blood ran cold. The dates stretched back years. Some withdrawals came from joint ventures Mom had funded for Claire. Others came from loans Mom believed were helping Claire's future. Instead, Derek had quietly drained the money. Nearly $800,000. I immediately called Claire. She arrived shaking. Together we reviewed every document. By the time we finished, she looked destroyed. He told me those businesses failed. They never existed. Tears rolled down her face. For years Derek had manipulated her. Lied to her. Used her. And now we had proof. When confronted, Derek exploded. He accused everyone of conspiracy, forgery, jealousy, anything except innocence. Then the investigators got involved. More records appeared. More lies surfaced. The amount stolen climbed higher. Nearly $1 million. The man who had proudly announced his wife's inheritance at our mother's funeral suddenly found himself facing criminal investigations. And Claire finally saw him clearly. She filed for divorce 2 days later. The final meeting took place exactly 30 days after the funeral. Everyone gathered once again in Robert's office. This time Derek wasn't there. A restraining order prevented contact. Claire looked different. Stronger. Healthier. Like someone waking from a long nightmare. Robert opened the final envelope left by Mom. The room became silent. To my daughters. He read. Money reveals character faster than hardship ever can. I felt tears forming. If you are hearing this, then you have completed your tasks. Robert continued. Emily, I wanted you to remember where our family began. I swallowed hard. Claire, I wanted you to remember who you were before someone convinced you that your value depended on them. Claire began crying. The estate was never a competition. Robert smiled gently. It was a lesson. The room was completely silent. Everything I own will be divided equally between my daughters. 50% each. Claire covered her mouth. I closed my eyes. That sounded exactly like Mom. Fair. Firm. Wise. But Robert wasn't finished. One final instruction. The additional funds recovered from Derek's fraudulent activities will be donated to the Housing Foundation. I hope this reminds everyone that greed can destroy a family, but truth can save one. By the time Robert finished reading, tears were streaming down both our faces. Mom had known. Not every detail. But enough. Enough to create one final plan. Enough to protect Claire. Enough to expose Derek. Enough to bring her daughters back together. 6 months later, Claire and I stood outside the first furniture store Mom had ever owned. The same store where my task had begun. The sign had been restored. The building renovated. Employees laughed inside. Customers filled the showroom. And for the first time in years, my sister smiled without fear. You know, she said softly, Mom beat him. I looked up at the store. No. Claire frowned. What do you mean? I smiled through tears. She saved you. Claire stared at the building for a long moment. Then she nodded. Because we both knew the truth. The real inheritance wasn't the money. It wasn't the houses. It wasn't the investments. It wasn't even the business. The real inheritance was the lesson our mother left behind. That wealth means nothing without integrity. That love cannot survive control. And that sometimes a mother's final act of protection happens long after she's gone. As the evening sun settled across the parking lot, Claire slipped her hand into mine exactly as she had when we were little girls. For the first time since Mom's death, the grief felt lighter. Not gone. Never gone. But lighter. And somewhere deep inside, I could almost hear Mom laughing. Because even from beyond the grave, she had managed to win the final argument.